Andrew Jackson was born March 5, 1767, to Scotch-Irish parents in the Washoe region of South Carolina. His father, Andrew Jackson, died in 1767, the year Jackson was born. His mother, Elizabeth Betty Hutchinson, died of cholera helping Continental soldiers in 1781. He had two brothers, Hugh and Robert, who both died during the Revolutionary War. Jackson was the youngest of all three. Washoe's region offered very little opportunity for formal education. He joined the Continental Army with his brothers at age 13 as a courier. Andrew's older brother died after the Battle of Stono Ferry, South Carolina in 1779 while battling the British. 2 years later, Andrew and his brother Robert were taken prisoners. The British treatment of Jackson and his brother during capture led to his deep resentment and extreme anti-British attitude. Both brothers contracted smallpox during imprisonment, and Robert was dead days after release. Later that year, Betty Jackson came across cholera while nursing Continental soldiers. Andrew became an orphan at 14. He spent the next year living with relatives. After the war, Jackson taught school briefly but didn't like it. He decided to practice law instead. In 1784, he was sent to Salisbury, North Carolina, where he studied for several years. In September 1787, he was admitted to the North Carolina bar. In the beginning of 1788, he began his public career as a prosecuting officer for the Superior Court of Nashville, Tennessee. When in 1796 Tennessee separated from North Carolina and became the 16th state, Jackson became the first congressman. The following year, the Tennessee legislature elected him U.S. Senator, but he resigned after only one session. Following his service in Congress, he served 6 years as a judge on the Tennessee Supreme Court. In 1802, he was elected Mayor General of the Tennessee Militia. 10 years later, Governor Willie Blount gave him the rank of Major General of U.S. forces and later led troops during the First Seminole War in Florida. He was declared a national hero in the War of 1812 after the great defeat of the British at the Battle of New Orleans, which occurred several weeks after the war had ended. He was given the nickname Old Hickory by his officials during a march to Natchez, Mississippi, in which he had strict discipline and his soldiers would say he was a tough as hickory. He was part of the 1824 presidential election, or the stolen election. Jackson swept the popular vote but didn't have enough electoral votes to automatically win the presidency, and as a result, the House of Representatives had to decide. Jackson ran against Henry Clay of Kentucky, Speaker of the House of Representatives, John Quincy Adams of Massachusetts and Secretary of State, and William H. Crawford of Georgia and Secretary of Treasury. Quincy Adams thought Jackson was a badly educated bumpkin with little preparation for high office. During the campaign, Jackson was mainly charged and accused with the facts that his current wife, Miss Jackson, had not legally divorced her previous husband, therefore he was married into an adulterous relationship. Jackson and Rachel had confused permission to sue the ex-husband with an actual declaration of divorce. Therefore, Jackson married Rachel in 1791, not realizing Rachel was still legally married. However, they finally remarried in 1794. Rachel Jackson died on December 22, 1828. Jackson blamed the death on the stress caused by the public discussion of their supposed immorality during the campaign. The 1828 election, Jackson defeated Adams and 4 years later defeated Clay in the election of 1832. Andrew Jackson was the first president who did not come from an aristocratic background. He was also the first to have his vice president, John C. Calhoun, resign. He was the first to marry a divorcee. He was the first to be nominated at a national convention on his second term. He was the first to use an informal kitchen cabinet of advisors. The first president to use the pocket veto to kill a congressional bill. Jackson had a strong presidency and vetoed 12 pieces of legislation, more than the first 6 presidents put together. Jackson also believed in a strong union, and this belief brought him into open opposition with Southern legislators, especially those from South Carolina. South Carolina thought the 1832 tariff signed by President Jackson was much too high. In retaliation, the South Carolina legislature passed an ordinance of nullification, which rejected the tariff and declared the tariff invalid in South Carolina. Therefore, he issued a presidential proclamation against South Carolina. The whole Congress supported Jackson's position on the issue, and a compromise tariff was passed in 1833. The incident was a precursor of the positions that would lead almost 30 years later to the war between the states, otherwise known as the Civil War. Another major issue during Jackson's presidency was his refusal to sanction the rechartering of the Bank of the United States. Jackson thought Congress had not had the authority to create the bank in the first place, but he also viewed the bank as operating for the primary benefit of the upper classes at the expense of working people. Jackson used one of his dozen vetoes, and the bank's congressional supporters did not have enough votes to override him. The bank ceased to exist when its charter expired in 1836, but even before that, the president had weakened it considerably by withdrawing millions of dollars of federal funds. Jackson's actions regarding the Native Americans were not pleasant. He led troops against them both in the Creek War and the First Seminole War, and during his first administration the Indian Removal Act was passed in 1830. The act offered the Indians land west of the Mississippi River in return for evacuation of their tribal homes in the east. About 100 million acres of traditional Indian lands were decreed under this law. 2 years later, Jackson did nothing to make Georgia abide by the Supreme Court's ruling in Worcester v. Georgia, in which the court found that the state of Georgia did not have any jurisdiction over the Cherokees. Georgia ignored the court's decision, and so did Andrew Jackson. In 1838 to 1839, Georgia evicted the Cherokees and forced them to march west. About 25% of the Indians were dead before they reached their new lands in Oklahoma. The Indians referred to this march as the Trail of Tears, and even though it took place after Jackson's presidency, the root of the march can be found in Jackson's failure to uphold the legal rights of Native Americans during his administration. During Jackson's presidential years, 2 states were admitted to the Union, Arkansas in 1836 and Michigan in 1837, and the rulings of Roger Taney, one of Supreme Court appointments, had an impact on American life long after Jackson's retirement. In 1836, Taney succeeded John Marshall as Chief Justice. One of Taney's early rulings gave permission for states to restrict immigration, while another destroyed the transportation monopoly in Massachusetts, establishing for the first time the principle in U.S. law that the public good is superior to the private rights. Jackson's health was never good, and there was times during his presidency when it seemed he would not live to complete his term. Yet he completed his terms, and in 1837 retired to his home near Nashville, which he and Rachel had named the Hermitage. Jackson remained a force in politics in his later years. For example, it was very much Jackson's behind-the-scenes maneuvering which secured the presidency for his successor, Martin Van Buren, and in 1840 he actively campaigned for Van Buren in Van Buren's unsuccessful candidacy for re-election. Jackson also worked for the annexation of Texas and remained loyal to future President James K. Polk, another North Carolina native. Polk had been one of Jackson's strongest supporters in Congress as chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. In his last few years, Jackson's health deteriorated badly, and he died at the Hermitage on June 8, 1845.
Carry on my wayward son, there'll be peace when you are done. Lay your weary head to rest, don't you cry.